Former President Trump and his claims about how the U.S. basically gave away the Panama Canal.
Yeah, I remember that. He was saying we sold it for $1, which sounds like a pretty bad deal, right?
It does, doesn't it? But like with a lot of history, things are way more complicated than they seem at first.
So what's the real story then?
Well, we got to rewind a bit, back to the 70s when Jimmy Carter was president. He saw handing over the canal to Panama as this big moment, like fixing a historical wrong.
Yeah, I mean, the U.S. did kind of take control of it in a, let's say, assertive way back in the day.
You could say that again. So anyway, Carter gets these treaties signed in 1977, the Torrijos-Carter treaties. They set up this 20-year handover process, ending in 1999 when Panama officially took over.
I bet that wasn't an easy sell back then, was it? Wasn't there a ton of opposition?
Oh yeah, tons. Lots of folks saw it as the U.S., like losing power, giving up something crucial. Even Ronald Reagan was against it.
Wow, Reagan too. That's saying something.
It was a big deal. But Carter, he got it through the Senate eventually, even got some surprising support from people like, you wouldn't believe it, John Wayne.
Wow, that's wild. Okay, but back to Trump's claim. Did the U.S. really just sell the canal for $1?
Nope, not at all. Those treaties were super complex. One set up the 20-year transition. The other guaranteed the canal would stay open to all countries. No one was getting exclusive rights or anything.
So more like a carefully planned handoff than a yard sale.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the U.S., they put up a decent chunk of change during those 20 years, like $345 million in loans and credits to help Panama get ready.
Okay, so not just a buck and a handshake then.
Right. And on top of that, the U.S. kept the right to defend the canal if anyone threatened it. So even though Panama was running things day to day, the U.S. wasn't like totally hands off.
Sounds like Trump's version of events is, well, let's just say simplified for effect.
I think that's putting it diplomatically. It plays into this whole idea that America's losing its power, getting taken advantage of.
Which, resonates with some people. It's a powerful narrative.
Yeah.
Even if it's not the whole truth.
Exactly. But it ignores the fact that both the U.S. and Panama have actually benefited from the canal being in Panamanian hands.
So it's not just about who owns it, but how well it works for everyone involved.
Right. The canal's still super important for global trade, and the U.S. economy still benefits from it running smoothly. And for Panama, it's a source of pride and a huge moneymaker, bringing in billions every year.
Win-win, right. So even if Trump's wrong about the deal itself, his worries about the U.S. falling behind, they might not be totally crazy.
It's funny, isn't it? He might be looking at the wrong problem, but the underlying anxiety that the world's changing and the U.S. might not always be on top, that's real.
And it seems like Panama is caught in the middle of all this.
Yep.
You've got Trump on one side making threats, and then China on the other, pouring money into the region. Talk about pressure.
They're in a tough spot, for sure. Panama wants to work with everyone, get those investments, but not get bossed around by anyone.
Makes sense. They want to be their own country, make their own choices.
Exactly. But Trump's tough talk, even if he doesn't mean it literally, it makes Panama nervous. It pushes them away from the U.S. and maybe closer to China, which is the opposite of what he wants, right?
It's like the harder you squeeze, the more things slip through your fingers.
That's a good way to put it.
Whoa.
So what happens next? Does the Panama Canal become this battleground between the U.S. and China? Or can Panama find a way to stay neutral and thrive?
That's the big question, isn't it?
It really does feel like things could go either way, doesn't it? Like, will cooperation win out, or will things get messy?
Yeah, I mean, the world feels pretty unpredictable these days. But speaking of China, they're not exactly shying away from getting involved, are they?
Not at all. That Belt and Road initiative they've got going, it's massive, and it reaches all the way to Panama. They're investing heavily in ports and infrastructure right around the canal.
That's got to have some folks in Washington pretty nervous, right? The U.S. has always seen the Americas as like their backyard, and now China's waltzing in with her checkbook.
You're not wrong. It's a new kind of power game, and it's tricky. It's not like the old days where you could just flex your military muscle. How do you stop a port deal or a construction project with tanks? You can't.
So what's the play then? How does the U.S. keep up?
It's got to be smarter, more subtle. You got to offer better deals, stronger partnerships, real benefits for Panama, not just threats.
It's like, hey, Panama, we're the good guys, remember? We're here to help you succeed. But actions speak louder than words, right?
Absolutely. Empty promises don't cut it anymore. But back to Panama, they're in a bind, aren't they? They want to take China's money, but not become like their puppet.
Makes sense. Who wants to be beholden to anyone, especially a country with, let's say, a different approach to democracy?
Right. So Panama's trying to walk this fine line, saying, hey, we're neutral, open for business, but we're still in charge here, trying to keep both the U.S. and China happy, which is not easy.
And then you've got Trump, like, throwing fuel on the fire with his talk about taking back the canal. It's got to make Panama think, okay, maybe China's the safer bet here.
Talk about unintended consequences. It's like he's pushing them right into China's arms.
Talk about shooting yourself in the foot, right? Instead of, bringing Panama closer, he's doing the opposite. And probably making other countries think twice about trusting the U.S., too.
Sadly, yeah. It makes the U.S. look unreliable, quick to threaten instead of cooperate. Not a good look on the world stage.
So if the U.S. wants to stay in the game, keep the Panama Canal working for everyone, what's the move?
Ditch the tough guy act. Treat Panama like an equal partner, respect their decisions, and work together to solve problems. Collaborate, don't dictate.
Basically, grow up and act like a responsible world power.
Pretty much. Realize that it's not the U.S.'s world anymore, it's everyone's world. And that means sharing, compromising, finding solutions that benefit everyone, not just yourself.